Hey there. So this video is going to be about calories in, calories out, and why I think it does not work for people with really any metabolic issues. And so I believe, a fundamental flaw within the calories in, calories out model that really just isn't talked about enough. But before we get into why I think this model doesn't necessarily work, we have to understand exactly what a calorie is. So when I was in school, we actually determined how to calculate 1 calorie. And so what we did was we used this device called a bomb calorimeter. It was like this big insulated bowl, essentially, that had all these probes, and it was the purpose of it was to determine how much energy was required to raise 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. So what we did, at least with my group, is that my little group, lab group, we burned a Dorito over this Bunsen burner, and I remember very distinctly that it had a blue flame that we burned this Dorito over. And of course, it was in a fume hood. Everything was measured. We had all these probes in this fume hood. It was a closed system, in other words, as closed as we could get it to be accurate with these calculations. And so when we did that, I remember something that really resonated with me this entire time was that, when does our bodies ever get to the temperature of a blue flame, which I believe is, 2000 something degrees Fahrenheit. So when is that ever the case for human biology? Never, right? So anyways, after we burned this Dorito over this blue flame, we collected all the ash. We measured the pressure changes. I don't quite exactly remember all the details of what we did, but essentially we used unit conversions to change the amount of work done within that system. We used joules for that unit, and we converted joules into kilocalories. And kilocalories is just the, standard unit for, within scientific studies, if you will, the scientific community. So when we convert kilocalories into calories, they're essentially the same thing. We just use calories for the general public because it's just easier to understand. But 1 calorie is 1,000 kilocalories. And so that is where that comes from. So that is the unit of energy for calories in the first place, is that it's literally food that's been burned over a blue flame. And that never quite sat well with me, mainly because, again, our bodies don't ever get that hot. And if you think about it, a joule is actually electrical and work energy. And of course we do these unit conversions, but if you think about digestion and metabolism, these are all chemical energies for the most part. So these conversions don't necessarily encompass the complexities of biological processes, and I don't think it ever will. If we were to standardize our metabolic health into a simple equation, a simple arithmetic equation at that. So anyways, that's one of the reasons why I don't think the calories in, calories out typically works for people. And that's not even talking about the quality of the calorie, the information contained within the calorie. Nor does it address, again, these biological processes that our bodies produce, every day. So another reason why I don't think this calories in, calories out works for everyone is that it doesn't account necessarily for the changes that your brain makes in your body when you start experiencing a calorie deficit. So when we're eating fewer than what we're used to on average, your brain thinks you're dying. So when your brain thinks you're dying, there's a autonomic response that is essentially elicited in the limbic system. These are processes you can't control for the most part. They're not conscious processes. Your brain will elicit responses to counter that weight loss, which is why most weight loss efforts, I hate to say it, but most short-term weight loss efforts do not ever translate into long-term lifestyle changes. So, or at least when it comes to weight. And so, when we talk about short-term losses with weight, does that actually mean we're healthier in the long term? I would argue maybe not so much. It depends. It's obviously a very complex process there. But, one of the things that really just, I guess, bothers me is when people try to simplify metabolic issues into a calories in, calories out model, or more of a numerical sense, something that can be scaled or measured quantitatively. And so, if we were to apply that logic for other systems in our bodies, how do you quantify something like mental health? How do you quantify your daily energy? How do you quantify your sleep or your emotions? You really can't put those aspects into numbers for the most part. I mean, we're trying to, don't get me wrong, but right now we just don't really have that kind of data. How do you quantify your immune function and whether you're resilient against disease? It's very different and individualized for everybody. So I believe metabolism is the same way, because everyone's genetics are completely unique and individual. And I mean, just as an aside, if you take identical twins, these are people that are genetically completely identical, they still have different health outcomes. They still have different physical manifestations of their health, as well as perhaps internal manifestations. And these are people that are genetically identical. So to me, that's proof right there that it's definitely not as simple as calories in, calories out. So, anyways, another reason, I have many reasons, but this is just a few that I'm going to talk about in this video, is that I have an idea within the clinical experience, is that there are certain sets of profiles within your body that do regulate metabolism. And these, I call it a trifecta, but these profiles include your neurotransmitters, your hormones, and your enzymes. So neurotransmitters are things like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and then you have hormones that are like insulin, cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, things like that. And then you have enzymes that are things like leptin, protease, or sorry, not leptin, lipase, protease, amylase. These are your corresponding enzymes to process fat, protein, and carbohydrates. And so you have these different profiles of neurotransmitters, hormones, and enzymes that regulate your metabolism. And of course, the calories in, calories out has no overlap with any of the processes required within these metabolic profiles. So weight loss typically is temporary because our bodies don't really have enough time in that short term to change these neurotransmitters, these hormones, and these enzymes enough. And I always say that if you're trying to achieve long-term weight loss, you really have to get used to, essentially you have to train your brain to understand this lower equilibrium that you're trying to achieve with your body. And that's why weight loss is so difficult, is because you have to have the time go by. And a good example of this is it's really just limited on how, for example, how hair can grow, how fast your skin can replenish itself, how fast your nails can grow. These are literally cells dividing in your body every single day, and we are absolutely regulated by that. I don't care who you are. All our genetics are regulated by what I call this rate of cellular division. So if you try to hack that, if you try to bypass that with very, very quick weight loss or weight gain, for that matter, either way, when you try to shift or take a shortcut within these biological processes, you're actually further inducing metabolic strain on your body because your body's trying to keep up or slow down too quickly. And so that's why long-term weight loss is very difficult, is because you have to kind of put the right pressure on the treatment, but then also maintain that pressure of, let's say, the treatment over time. So anyways, that is kind of just my 2 cents about the calories in, calories out, and why I think it's fundamentally flawed for the most part. That's not to say, just to throw this out there, that's not to say that there is no merit with this calories in, calories out. It does work, but that's only if you're metabolically healthy, which if you look at the prevalence of chronic disease in the United States, that kind of advice, if you're following advice, especially diet related advice, when it comes to calories in, calories out, it just won't apply to you, especially if you have metabolic syndrome, or not syndrome, but any sort of metabolic imbalance. That concept just gets further and further less useful to you, more and more essentially inadequate for your needs. So also, just to wrap up this video, one of the things that I want to point out is that if we don't, let's say, use this calories in, calories out model, then how do we know we're doing the right thing? Well, I think the biggest thing that I would usually encourage people to look for, and again, these are non-scalable aspects of health. These aren't things that can be quantified for the most part. These are essentially your own feelings, how you are able to be aware of your own processes in your body, proprioception, in other words. So the first thing I would look for is daily energy levels. How well does your energy serve you? Do you wake up refreshed in the morning? Does that energy last throughout the day? Do you have a mid-afternoon drag, or are days typically fine, especially with excess energy to use for things like exercise or just like gardening or whatever your hobbies are? Do you have the daily energy that's there that you want? Another thing would be your immune function. Are you sick all the time? Are you tired all the time? Well, yeah, I mean, your immune function absolutely is related to your metabolism. So, and again, these are non-quantifiable. So if your immune function is working well, typically that's a good sign your body's working well. If your daily energy levels are adequate, or even surpasses adequate, then that's excellent. Is your mental health okay? Is your cognitive function okay? Can you process complex problems? Can you solve complex problems easily? Or even if you have to struggle a little bit, do you have the capacity to do so? Another thing would be your sleep quality. Do you often sleep well? Are you waking up and feeling refreshed? That these are things that are not really quantifiable. Another thing would be digestive health. Are you going regularly, or do you not experience any sort of digestive issues for the most part? These are all things that you can look for that kind of tell you that if you're doing the right thing for yourself or not. But mainly the biggest one is daily energy levels and how that serves you in the long term. So let me know if you guys have any questions or concerns. But yeah, this will be a bigger video, I think, later in the future. But for now, those are just some of the things I wanted to start off with as far as calories in, calories out. And just make sure not to quantify your entire health on a very simple arithmetic equation. Thanks, and I hope you guys have a good one.